So just going back, I'm gonna go back to like freshman year. We're gonna work through some stuff. So originally, why did you decide to come to Stevenson?
Oh man. I think it's fair looking back to say that I had a pretty, decently rough middle school experience. I found that I wasn't really fitting in, and I wanted somewhere that would give me the opportunities to kind of find a self that had been sheltered by the experience that I was kind of locked into. So, touring around local schools, a family friend of ours who was, one of our close neighbors, they had a student going to Stevenson, and they invited me to come for a tour. And just walking around on campus, I was completely blown away at the sheer scale of everything and how much they catered to the students' growth and their individuality, and the kinds of things they offered just enticed me so much. So I got in the car and I'm like, Mom, this is where I want to go. And I was just really inspired by the experience, and had to follow it through.
So what is the best memory you've made here?
There's a lot. There's a lot I'd have to go through. I think I took a songwriting class my freshman year, and I went and kind of co-taught. I was a TA in that for a semester my junior year as well. I think going back and something that I felt really comfortable in, that I found to be one of my passions, and sharing that with other people and helping them discover it was a really unique experience for me. And getting to work with all these younger students and guide them was a good privilege.
So now that leads perfectly into like you just started this whole music career, right? You want to tell me a little bit about that? How'd you get it going?
Sure. It's kind of difficult to place a lot of milestones. Like, you'll hear a lot of people saying, "Yeah, and then I recorded my first song and it came out really well." I think my personal process was less about the accomplishment. It was less oriented around like what people would be listening to, and more just the joy of creating. So as I started, I was just making these really disorganized, very simple and very unconclusive 4 or 8 bar loops on my laptop. I was amazed at all the possibilities that I found people could create with such limited resources. Like, a kid in their bedroom could just write these entire symphonies and enact them for other people around the world to listen to. That concept just blew me away. And because I was such a fan of music, and because I listened to so much, it's been a really integral piece in my family for a while. I felt that adding my own contribution and trying to express myself in that way more digitally, having more control over everything, because I'm the orchestrator, being a music producer, like that fascinated me. So I found that the more effort I allocated to something, the more time I spent learning a specific skill. Like, hey, I want to put some ukulele in a song. Hey, I hear people doing really cool piano licks. I'm going to learn to improvise on the piano. I've been designing sounds because I got tired of using other people's. It's kind of a brilliant process in that you're in control of all the materials that you play with. You can unlock the different aspects for yourself just by putting time into experimenting with them. And then once you feel that you have mastered it enough, you can use it in kind of your arsenal or in your palette. And I feel like building that palette was my main goal, because that's what captured me the most. The idea of, hey, this is something completely new to me, and I can manipulate it to express how I'm feeling. Like, that's wild. So in terms of a musical career, everything kind of originated from that process of me discovering how to use these different tools, and then sharing the creations that I made when I got to a point where I was proud with like the product. And it turns out a lot of people were proud right along next to me, and I got a lot of praise that inspired me to keep going. I would, only half like an idea. I wouldn't be very confident with it, but, people would comment and say like, "Hey man, this really cheered me up. This made my day. Your work is so cool. You put in like a lot of effort here. I love this transition." And the support of an audience, or having people that actually listen and actually, care about something that I put my time into, it's motivating. And it kind of caused me to keep going on that. Whereas if I felt, as sustained as I felt by the process of doing it on my own and going through that constant experimentation, I feel like it would run out eventually. Just knowing that people are listening, and knowing that there's other creative, talented individuals that are hearing my work and being inspired by that too. like that just keeps me going, if that makes sense.
So I know now you've dropped. Was this your second album that you just dropped?
This is actually my third. The first one was somewhat unofficial. It was 15 tracks, so more of a collection of songs that I had written and was kind of happy with and wanted to bundle up in like this big creative project. The first one was called Whatever You Want. It was more like collaboration oriented. Pretty much every track, I think 9 out of the 15 or something like that, was with one of my friends, featured either vocally or instrumentally. So I was kind of discovering my sound, and my second album was like, okay, I got a sound that I think is working. I'm going to try and establish that. I'm going to try and use the same instruments, and that project was called Sketches of Us. It was these short little songs. Well, that's where the sketches comes from. All acoustic instrumentation, very organic, like happy, bright sounds that were really open-ended and airy. And I loved that kind of experience for a while until this project came around, and I said, hey, what if I experiment doing more songs that are like emotionally oriented, more dramatic, more, full sounding? And kind of straying myself away from this image that I was trying to fulfill to experiment with something that felt more personal and more real to me. That was the goal of Dear Whoever, which is the most recent album. Sorry, I was a bit confusing to explain.
That was great. So, I know you kind of touched on this, but and you said that this was a much more like emotionally or like dramatic album.
Right.
What really inspired some of those songs?
Right. Yeah. So I felt like for a while, as I'm sure a lot of people did, I was going through a rough patch, being isolated from this community mainly, and being isolated from a lot of friends that I knew were supporting me, or I knew would support me if I was there with them. Like all these experiences that I was distanced from, and all the effect of that distance, like the impact that it had on me, was becoming more and more noticeable by the day. So I think I tried my best to like maintain positive mental health and positive habits, but I'm sure there were moments where it definitely wasn't a possibility, and I felt myself, feeling weaker or more like less positive than I would want to. So for a time, I started experimenting with the idea of, how do I think about reality, this cold, kind of harsh, authentic version of what I'm in now, where things are difficult and I'm isolated and a lot of the times I feel really lonely, versus what reality used to be and what reality potentially could be again, where I'm immersed with people that, I love and care about, and where I have so much access to these experiences that I, really enjoy. It's a pretty basic concept, but the album kind of explores that division. It explores how somebody can find themselves taking like their consciousness away from reality to daydream and to think about, how would things be better if I was in this, other place? How would things be better if I wasn't in the situation that sadly is my own? And touching on that division, touching on how someone goes about like navigating what's real. It's obviously very complicated, but you'll find that the songs contrast a lot. Some of them are really happy because it's exploring, hey, this is how things could have been. Hey, this, I know that the positivity is out there. I have love to give. I have things to say. But I can't give it, and I can't say the things. And a lot of the sadder songs come in those moments of realizing this is real. So I'm trying my best to explain it. I can't say it's the best talking day for me. I'm a bit out of it, but hopefully that touches on the core concept a bit better.
Yeah. So now I gotta ask what's next. I'm, as a fan, I'm dying to know what's next. When's the next album? Because I enjoyed listening to that one you just dropped so much.
I'm so happy to hear it. So, as this album was, more oriented around a concept than a specific musical style, I found that the musical style jumped around a lot, as you can probably hear by listening. A track will go from like a sad, like ballad, and like a slow tempo with lots of strings and dramatic little like synth noises, to a really upbeat like song, maybe in the same meter but loads faster, full of perky percussion and jazz leads. And it's I kind of just followed the natural progression that project laid out for me. No matter how confusing it might have sounded to an audience, I tried to stick with what felt real. And I think in that process, I learned the effectiveness of combining things so much. I feel like my other albums in the past are kind of not bland, but kind of stuck within one sphere, whereas expanding into multiple areas and touching on all these different styles within one like complete entity was such a unique experience for me. So primarily when I think about the future, I'm going to find the right balance between all the sides that I've been experimenting with. I'm going to find the right places to include the dramatic heavy string moments and the sad lyrics, and also the happier ones. So most likely another collaborative album where I can find the right people to touch on those contrasts and those subtleties, and to create the same like dynamic range that this album expressed, but more in a sense that's more balanced and more filled out like properly.
So now you've touched on going to have more collaborations. You want to tell me a little bit about some of the collaborations you've already made and how you actually started those projects with other people?
Sure. I think it's worth it to start off that pretty much, like I'd say 95%, all of my collaborations that I've done in the past are done via the internet. The collaborators live around the world, and we've only been united most of the time by a common love for music, a common love for expressing ourselves through our sound, and most of the time each other's individual music as well. You'll find people and it's like, hey, I'm such a big fan of you, like I love the kind of thing you do, and they'll say the same thing back. And it's ridiculous. You have this mutual appreciation while you each have like a greater understanding for the art itself, and that just leads you down a path of working together well. It leads you down a path of friendship oftentimes. I've found myself becoming like close with a lot of these people through this understanding that we share, and through our ability to express ourselves. Like, it just feels really unique and really personal. So most of the collaborations that I've done in the past are people that I have that respect for, and people that I say, wow, I love what you're doing. I would be honored to invite you to do something with me. And fortunately, they agreed. In this most recent album, you'll note that there was only one feature, whereas past projects have done more. My good friend Grandace is a rapper over in Cincinnati, Ohio, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. And he is just a really, positive, like, brilliant guy. His energy is just really contagious. So, like, I'll see his Instagram story and he'll just be walking down the street and saying, I'm feeling good today. And it just kind of like fills up your heart a little bit, and you can hear this influence in his music. He just speaks with such style and such like heart, but in the same way, it's also really positive and really, energizing to listen to. I was just really, really inspired hearing him on a track with a producer called G Mills. It's called Same Threads, if you're curious. And after hearing that, I'm like, this guy is ridiculous. Like, I was just blown away at his skills. So fortunately, I was able to contact him and ask if he'd like to listen to something that I made that I thought matched his style. And he said he really loved it, and he did a phenomenal job. So most of the time, it just happens like that. I think that's a pretty good example. You just reach out, and you're most of the time kind of instantly united, if it's meant to happen at least, by your understanding of music and your understanding of each other, and being able to create together and say, hey, like, we did this, and it's unique because it's you and I. And we each have our own style, and this is the first time that style is mixing. Like, it's a really cool experience. I hope that helps sum it up a little bit.
That was great. I don't think I have a whole lot more. Oh, just real quick, is there anything on your Stevenson bucket list that you want to do before graduation?
Oh, goodness. I'm not quite sure. Oh, this is pretty exciting, but as you might know, well, actually, I'm thinking of a couple related to this. As you might know, I used to spend pretty much all of my free time after school, at least, at the grand piano in Douglas Hall. It was kind of like a comfort space for me, where I'd go and play, much to the disappointment in the beginning of some of the administration working there, I'm sure. I always felt bad, so I'd try and play really quietly, or I'd leave because I didn't want to bother them. It turns out they were really lovely and supportive when I started getting to know them better. And a couple of weeks ago, I was actually invited to come back and play the album at the piano. They're like, Aidan, you should come by. And it was just a really sweet, like, positive gesture that kind of shocked me, not because I expected them not to, but because even with, in the face of all these restrictions and all these changes, they still wanted to think about me. They still wanted to say, like, hey, why don't you come by? And I appreciated that a ton. So definitely on my bucket list is paying them a visit, playing the piano, paying that a visit too, and getting back to that space where I used to feel really comfortable. And hopefully, if there's ever an opportunity to try out the organ in the church in the forest, that would be incredible. That thing is so cool. But other than that, just savoring the time that I have left. It decreases much more rapidly than it should, I feel like. And getting to spend it with the people I care about and kind of forge these last experiences to function as memories for me in the future. I'm feeling comfortable with how things are playing out, and I'm looking forward to these last few weeks.